You know what really makes us mad is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to punklottopod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose 1 year at random and then select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. No guests today because life's busy. And we'll probably remain busy for the next, couple months. Maybe we'll have some guests if I can figure out when my breaks are at school. As long as they correspond to when Dylan's in town.
Or don't have things to do otherwise.
Yeah. Work-wise. When it's just us, it means we can record in the middle of the day. Instead of waiting till nighttime to record. But yes, we are here talking about a pretty important record. A pretty important record overall. We'll get into that, I guess. But definitely an important record to you.
Yeah. Personally, it's a huge record. Culturally, it's a significant record.
Yeah, that's a fair way to describe it. Before we get into that, though, if you head over to our Patreon, you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. This week, we are doing, I don't know, we haven't decided. We've done the year 2001 in chart form already. So we just did an I'm Listening last week. We could do some homework, or we could do a News of the World. Those seem to be the easiest to do without too much prep. We'll see. We'll figure it out. Maybe we'll do a 2001 album chart dive for the non-punk stuff. So like the other stuff, which there might be enough there. We'll have to look and see.
Yeah, it might be interesting enough to talk about.
We'll glance at it before we decide to do it or not. But otherwise, we might just do a News of the World. But you can get that for $1 over on patreon.com/punklottopod and all of our weekly bonus audio. If you join at the $10 tier, that means you get to select the album we devote an episode to. In the past, we've done... What are some good ones we did? We did Pretty in Pink, the soundtrack, and the movie on that one. We did... What was the last one we just did that we got? We did the Jello Biafra and Mojo Nixon record. Oh, Thrice Illusion of Safety. That was probably the most recent one of those we did. Yeah, it's fun. You get to pick whatever record you want us to talk about, and we'll do a whole episode on it. And that's $10. Sign up once, drop down to the $1 tier, or drop off. Either way, it's up to you. Patreon.com/punklottopod. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at punklottopod. We have an email address, punklottopod@gmail.com, and a voicemail line, which is 202-688-PUNK. No feedback on the laughing audio or integrity follow-up, but we don't always get calls there. Anything else to plug? I think it's everything.
That's
Substack.
Everything for now.
There is a Substack you can follow whenever we decide to utilize it.
Yeah.
punklottopod.substack.com.
Last time I used it, I wrote a review of a Wilco record, so I don't...
I think the last time I used it was to post a super delayed second half of my best of 2021. Probably put it up in like March or something. Well, today we are talking a pretty big record, so let's get into it. We are talking about the year 2001. And before we get into the actual album, let's talk about some other records that came out that year. We did a chart dive on this, and Dylan and I were talking about this right before we recorded. I was looking at the stuff on this chart, and I don't remember any of this, talking about any of this stuff.
Yeah. 2001, I picked the record today for the listener. So as I was looking at the charts, I was like, I could talk about that. I could talk about that. I could definitely talk about that. Wow. So it's one of those years that you would think would be more significant. And there are certainly some massive, really important records, but then it doesn't. It's one of those top heavy years. Big names and some really important records. And then a lot of stuff that has fallen through the cracks of time, I think. Some stuff that was maybe of a moment that really didn't have a lasting impact the way some of these other records did. And kind of a weird time for, I guess, the most significant things going on. To me, it feels like there's really only like three, maybe four, but that fourth one that I'm thinking of is very much related to the third. Not scenes, but trends or classifications of punk music at this time, and it is pop punk. So we've got like Sum 41 put out All Killer No Filler, going Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, Blink-182. Kind of associated, we've got Bleed American by Jamie Eat World. And then there's also kind of the garage rockification and mainstreamification of indie rock. Strokes' Is This It is a huge record. I don't care for it.
Have you listened to it?
Yeah, I think I've heard that whole record. Somebody played it at work one time, like before shift, and it was like boring. It's boring.
I never understood people's fascination with the Strokes. Like, I thought that the handful of like singles were cool, and it was more like, oh, that's neat, they're doing a throwback thing. But like, I can only think of like one Strokes song, Last Night. That's like their biggest one, right? Yeah, I don't know why people were so like, the Strokes are geniuses.
We've also got White Blood Cells by the White Stripes in that lane.
Yeah, the White Stripes.
And
Diff, we talked about recently about our what do you call that? I don't care about the White Stripes. Our what's the word? I'm apparently blanking on like vocabulary words today. Ambivalence towards the White Stripes.
There was this weird brief moment where I was like kind of invested in them and listening to their records. And I've probably listened to like their first 4 records, which is probably all of their records. Actually, I think I've probably listened to all of their records because they did break up.
Yeah.
In the late O's.
That's true. For a band I don't care about, I definitely have heard every single one of their albums, I think. Icky Thump, was that the last one, or is there one more after that?
Yeah, Icky Thump was the last one. So that was 2007. So yeah, for some reason I listened to all of those records, and I was pretty familiar with all of them. More familiar, I would say, with the latter half of their discography. Ironically enough, I guess you would think it would be the other way, but it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick. It's really, really forgettable. And other than like the few singles that you know, and I know that there are deep cuts in there that are good, that are probably on par with the singles as far as like they could have been singles if they had been pushed, or at least like, sync rights for movies or something. They would have been good songs, but soundtrack songs. And then to me, the third category of punk is the true punk. And I feel like all of it, you can break it down into subgenres of like emo and post-hardcore and screamo and whatever, but I feel like all of it was still the same scene.
Yeah, like there's definitely something about it. It was the layer of, I think the type of people who were listening to emo and like the orgcore kind of stuff, or like the post-hardcore kind of stuff, or even almost the screamo stuff. It was all the same people listening to all of it. There was definitely more bleed over between like the type of people who were like, yeah, I love those 2 Page 99 records and the Propagandhi album that came out that year and the Alkaline Trio album. And,
and like the Propagandhi and like the Alkaline Trio, they might be at this point they would have been pretty high on the independent punk circuit, as far as like they would be the bands that like then did sign up, or like, we're at that crossover point of popularity. Saves the Day kind of in the same lane as well.
Mm.
But like if you told me Converge and On the Might of Princes and Page 99 and what's another good one to throw into this fictional show lineup that I'm constructing?
Piebald,
or yeah, like if you told me all of those bands played the same show,
yeah,
I'd believe you.
Yeah,
like that's how much like cross-pollination I feel like there was between punk and emo and hardcore and screamo. And like there's definitely like some metalcore and hardcore stuff that you wouldn't have nearly as much overlap with, but there would be a little bit.
Yeah, is this peak mixed bill shows?
It certainly seems like it, because I feel like to me the listeners of a lot of these bands are the same people, and I think
Yeah.
it's the same people going to a lot of the same shows.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Didn't ever really think of it that way. Like there was definitely a mainstream sound too, but like it was almost as if you were just, it was like this united kind of like, all right, that's the stuff that we hear on the radio, and then that's the stuff you might hear on college radio or like an independent station, and then there's everything else that we're all listening to.
Yeah, like I feel like someone listening to "The Moon Is Down" by Further Seems Forever in 2001 is also listening to background music by American Nightmare.
Yeah, I believe that.
And might even be listening to like fucking Unearth, you know?
Yeah. They're definitely listening to Converge. Like everybody was listening to Converge, which is funny because they're like one of the hardest bands ever. But it wasn't weird for somebody to go from Leftover Crack to Hot Water Music to Bane, you know? Like,
And because I feel like that's kind of where, it's in 2001, it's not that far removed from when you and I really got into punk and hardcore. And then we came at it from Christian rock. So then we went into Christian metalcore, and then we went into other kinds of metalcore, and then we went into like extreme metal and brown pants metal, and and then into like true hardcore, like hardcore of the moment, and like the Death Wish style that took over, that you really replaced metalcore pretty much overnight. And that was just the span of a few years, really. Like the progression of our listening and the growth of our musical taste under the punk umbrella was really just a very short period of time. And it was just being online and being like, oh, that looks cool, I'll listen to that, I'll download that. It would definitely, earlier might have been harder to have been like, you didn't have streaming and you might not have been able to download nearly as much, but you also might have had like a file sharing. You might have had a P2P, or you might have been using Napster in 2001. But
I think a lot of people were using Napster in 01. Like anybody who had like a slightly higher connection, internet connection than just a regular dial-up. But even back then, it would be like you had DSL, and you'd be like, "All right, I'm gonna download this whole album in 12 hours. I'm gonna set download on Kazaa, and then go to bed. And then when I wake up, I'll have it. Hopefully, as long as the internet connection maintained all night."
Yeah, you might just have a few songs by one artist.
Yeah.
Because it was like, I'll just, if I'm gonna commit the bandwidth to downloading this, I'll just pick like one song, see if I like it. Then maybe I'll go buy the CD.
That was how I got a lot of my first peer-to-peer like downloads, where it was literally just like, I had 5 songs from one artist from different records, and then one of them would be like a weird random recording too. It's like, what? Why do I have a live version of this?
Yeah, you'll have a random alternate version, or you have like the one-off, B-side single where they did a cover of somebody. And you're like, well, I'll download that. I want to hear that. But as far as, what are the big records that we hinted at, I feel like the ones that I maybe have the most significance to me, or like would have been kind of interested in talking about, I wanted to avoid some really significant records, some really big name records, in the event that we give someone else this list in the future for 2001. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm sorry, we already talked about Jane Doe by Converge. Pick something else. And then they're like, they don't have nearly as many good choices to pick from when you take away a record like that. But massive, huge record. Like,
also, by the way, somebody coming on the show, please pick Jane Doe by Converge so we can actually talk about it. Like, for real. Like, do a dive on it. Like, we've mentioned them in like I'm listening Patreon audios or like stuff like that. But yeah, I'd love to do a full ass episode.
And we've talked about Fugazi in the past, and I think The Argument is a great record. And this one could have been one that I feel like I could justify picking, because I do have a personal attachment to this record. I really like it. I think it's underrated in their discography. I mean, maybe not. It seems to have a pretty high rating, but at least according to Rate Your Music. But again, a big band. We've talked about them before. The closest, like the first thing I was like, oh, I could pick that. That could be the one. Was either Page 99's Document 8 or Document 7. I would have gone with Document 7 because I think it's a far better record. But either one would be worth talking about. And you kind of almost have to talk about them both together because they are so close together.
Yeah. What to you? What is the main difference between 8 and 7? Length.
7
Eight's
is
pretty
shorter.
long. 8's pretty long, isn't it?
7 is like 5 tracks and 25 minutes. It's got like one really long song on it or something. It's more of an EP, but it is a little long for an EP. And then 8 is like the full length record. Most people consider it like the actual album of that year. It is actually shorter though.
Oh, weird. Okay. Yeah. Why did I think 8 was longer?
Yeah, it's 20. Yeah, Document 8 is 20 minutes long.
Do they have one that is really long? Like 12 maybe?
12 is the majority rule split.
Oh, no. So not that one. Speaking of majority rule, they released interviews with David Frost in 2001.
Underrated record. Incredible.
Maybe 5 is the long one because it's 28 minutes long.
Yeah. It's the most tracks and length.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it has like the 11-minute song at the end. I think that 7 I think they're just better songs. They're more memorable. I think it sounds better too. I've never really cared for the way 8 sounded.
In my memory, I haven't listened to them back to back ever because I don't listen to music that way. But in like close proximity to each other, in my memory, 8 is muddier than 7.
Yeah.
Like a darker production sound.
Yeah, it is. I got a little bit of a kind of a blip on Blue Screen Life by Pinback. I've listened to that record before. Pinback is a band that I like kind of tried to get into a long time ago, and it didn't really stick. But I think that would be an interesting record to like revisit and think about and talk about. Rob Crow of that band is the other half of Plosives with John Reese. And I think he's a really good songwriter, and I think he's got an interesting voice. But for some reason, I don't know. Pinback is an oddity of a band. I feel like they're sort of indie rock, sort of math rock, sort of slowcore. Not a lot of bands I feel like I can confidently compare them to.
You know, there's always a part of me that if it was my turn to pick, I would want to go with something a little more, I don't know, not off the beaten path, but more of like, I don't know that album. And some people love it, and I should figure out why. So like, there's a piece of me that probably would have been like, let's do "I Get Wet" by Andrew WK, just to see what the hell, why people are obsessed with Andrew WK. Because the people who love him, fucking love him. I mean, I saw a weird version of Andrew WK live. So you know that beer company Dos Equis? They did this like free event in Charlotte at a music venue, where it was like, Andrew WK will be performing, and it will also have like freak show type stuff, like juggling and a guy trying to break the world record for holding his breath in a tank of water, and then people on stilts walking around. But you get free Dos Equis, and Andrew WK is going to be there, and he's going to be singing to backing tracks of his songs. It was bizarre. It wasn't the full band. It was just like backing track and him singing, and he's wearing like a white suit. Like more than just his regular like white shirt and white pants. And he didn't play that many songs. It was strange. Very weird.
Yeah, I don't understand Andrew WK. Didn't he host like a live action kids show on like Cartoon Network?
Yeah, I think
at one point.
Was it like a prank show or like a contest where kids had to do like obstacles or something like that? I don't know exactly what it was.
Yeah, it was like an obstacle course show, I feel like is what it was. There might have been like some like puzzles or something involved in it. It was weird.
Plus, he's an actor. There's actors portraying Andrew WK.
Yeah.
Isn't that the conspiracy? And he looks different than he used to.
I mean, didn't he get smashed in the face with a brick for that album cover? Probably broke his nose.
Yeah. But I guess looking at other albums that came out that year, I probably would have considered From Autumn to Ashes, Too Bad You're Beautiful. There's something about that band that like I get an immense chuckle out of when I hear that band. Maybe it's just because they're ridiculous. I'm finding that like the deeper I go, there's more stuff I find more interesting, like Burning Airlines Identikit or the Constantine's first record or Zao's self-titled.
There's definitely stuff that's down there that is good and worth talking about, but I figured the record that I picked today is, well, we'll get into why, but
yeah.
The only other thing that I briefly considered was, should I do a assessment of Reliant K's Anatomy of Tongue in Cheek, which is a record that I definitely listened to in 2001. Definitely bought that CD in 2001. I'm trying to think of the other record that I would have bought that year. It was probably an Audio Adrenaline record. There's probably some other stuff that came out that year that I bought, but maybe not in 2001, but shortly after. But that one I would know it very well. I don't know that I could do it.
You don't want to see if it holds up?
I don't think it will hold up. I think parts of it will hold up. There's definitely going to be some cringy stuff in there. And I didn't know if I could commit the brain power to doing it. Maybe someday.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what I would have been buying in 2001. I don't know. Like, I'm seeing stuff that came out on the either side of that year. But I don't know. I can't. Fireman Frenzy 2 Electric Boogaloo came out in 2001. That would be a fun one. That one does hold up. I know it does because I've listened to it. And arguably, it's like one of their most serious records, too. I was looking, too, on what we have covered in 2001 before. So previously, we covered Aso Karis and Taking Back Sunday's Self-Titled's. The Aso Karis is technically a 1997 album that got a reissue, and that's how we wound up talking about it in a 01 episode. We also talked about Adam and His Package, redefining music with MXPX's The Renaissance EP. So, like, I don't think I bought the Renaissance EP, though, until, like, 03. We did that episode with good friend Corey. And then we did Yaphet Kotto, Syncopated Synthetic Laments for Love. We did that with the band Calyx. And we did the Bouncing Souls, Brownie Circus, How I Spent My Summer Vacation, and Looking for the Summer as our 150th episode because it was our lost episode from the very first recording we attempted. So everything we've talked about from 01, it's not the big hitters. Like, I love that Yaphet Kotto record, and I love the Adam and His Package records, but those aren't, like, not like monster albums to be talking about. But today we are talking about, I don't want to call it a monster album, but it's important somewhat, but we'll get into it. So I gave you 2001 and you selected Frodus, and we washed our weapons in the sea. Frodus, a.k.a. Frodus Conglomerate International, a.k.a. Frodus Sound Laboratories, a.k.a. FCI, a.k.a. Frodus Escape Plan, a.k.a. Frodus Deposit Insurance Corporation. I don't know that last one. Do you know that last one?
I mean, FDIC. Yeah, but it's just one of those jokes. They've never actually been known as any of those names.
Yeah. It was usually just a joke in a liner note. It's how they got those labels.
Yeah.
They formed in 1993 in Washington, D.C. This was released March 3rd, 2001 on Fueled by Ramen Records. This is the band's fifth and final full-length album, following 1998's Conglomerate International. The personnel on this album is Nathan Burke on bass, vocals, and keys, Jason Hammaker on drums, and Shelby Sinka on guitar, vocals, and electronics. And the record was produced by Brian McTiernan, who we've talked about him a lot of times on the show. So in 01, he also had put out or produced albums by The Movie Life, Darkest Hour, Fairweather, Strike Anywhere, Mile Marker, Majority Rule. Mile Marker, Majority Rule probably being the closest sounding to the Frodus record. And in 01, Fueled by Ramen hadn't quite become the seed label that they would later become. So their most other notable records they put out that year were from The Stereo and Cadillac Blindside. So Don't know how that label turned into what they did become, but it's funny to look at their beginnings. All right, here it is. You selected Frodus. So why'd you pick this record?
Frodus in the garbage. Well, it's great. It's a 5-star record. Definitely was on our 100 and 100. Not totally sure where I placed it. On re-listening to it for this episode, I think shortly after I was just like thinking about the record, and I was kind of had an internal monologue, or might have been an external monologue, because I do talk to myself a lot. And without really like thinking about it, I said, well, it's my favorite punk record. And I was like, yeah, no shit. Of course it's my favorite punk record. Like, and it was like, I knew it, and then saying it, it was like realizing it. And then it was like obvious. It was just a whole roller coaster of like, like, why have I ever said that before? Was the thing that was odd to me. And I mean, there's, that's saying a lot. I mean, there's some huge stuff that's in like my 5 stars, desert island kind of punk records. It's obviously it's one of my favorite records of all time. Probably would be a top 10 all time record. Probably a top 5 all time record. This is like the immediate joke that I made was, what's something that you could give an unprompted 40 minute presentation on. There's so many things that I just know about this record that I've just internalized, and so many things about Frodus that I've just internalized that are like, for sure. It's just like, oh, did you know that one of the bass players of Frodus was in OK Go? That kind of factoid information that I have tucked away about Frodus. So putting this into like an actual cohesive 40-minute presentation, maybe not. This might be a really erratic episode, which is probably fitting for Frodus because they are a band with a very erratic history and a very erratic presentation. It all works. They're an erratic band.
And even their genre that they called themselves or were called, which we probably not really, it doesn't really get referred to anymore because I think it's considered offensive now, which makes me think, what does that band with that name do now? Not that they're active anymore, but
I don't think they're active anymore. I don't think they're worried about it either.
I'll just say it. So this is an offensive word, but it's not the kind of offensive word that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. The genre they did they call it themselves? Did they name it themselves?
I'm trying to think if they called that or if they were called that. I think maybe they were called that and then they kind of like adopted it.
Yeah. The term was called spazcore. Spaz isn't really accepted anymore as a word. No. So because Lizzo just used it in a word and got called out, used it in a song and got called out for it. And I was like, yeah, Lizzo, you shouldn't be. But it's also one that I also wonder if people even realize that you're probably not supposed to say anymore. It's one of those soft offensive words that a lot of people don't know it's offensive.
It's like one of those words that if you think about why people are using it as an insult, it's really, really offensive. Yeah. But the majority of people don't connect the dots.
Yeah.
And I think also like disconnect someone doing quote unquote spastic behavior from like people with autism.
Yeah.
And
I think it's a bigger no-no word in the UK.
Yeah.
I think.
And it was probably used more commonly there.
It's like using the word retarded here.
Yeah.
Like you still know people who say it.
Yeah.
And you're like, come on, man. Don't you just it's a feel bad word anyway. Like it's a word that just feels bad when you say it and hear it anyway. So, but you know people who use it.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't.
But anyway, that term got dropped. Like nobody really calls them that anymore. Thankfully. Yeah. They're mainly just referred to as a post-hardcore band or metcore, which is what they came up with.
Metcore, yeah, I was thinking like that's the term that Shelby definitely coined. What he would have used, and I think it fits better, in all honesty. Though I understand that I think that the way that they were maybe they used that term, used the not preferable term, was kind of like in solidarity with people who would have been called that. I don't want to speculate on like any member of Frodus and their any potential neurodiversity, but they were a nerd band And they
Yeah.
definitely would have been called that as an insult. So, I feel like it's probably similar to the ways in which I relate to LGBT people as like, well, I've been called homophobic slurs from a moving vehicle. So,
Yeah.
I do know what that feels like. So I can't claim it. It's not mine, but I get why it hurts.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're a nerd band. They're a nerd band, and I think Metcore works in that way. And in particular, it works with like the whole cyberpunk, stuff that is very much part of the Frodus aesthetic.
So it's funny though that going back to you calling it like, oh yeah, it's my favorite punk record. That's was that just a realization? Like, did that just like dawn on you? They're like, oh wow, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I don't think I never coined it that way or phrased it that way. Like,
Yeah.
It's obvious, but if someone had put me on the spot and said, name your favorite punk record, I mean, for one, that would be awful and horrible. Please don't do that to me. But at least now I know the answer.
Right.
I've decided now. But 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you said, what's your favorite punk record? And then I might think classic punk bands or
Yeah.
something that's more essentially punk and not necessarily something that's a subgenre of punk. But
Yeah, it would have to be like a don't think about it, just say it, like that type, And you saying that made me go, huh, I guess mine is Double Nickels on the Dime. I think that's my favorite punk record.
and that's the thing is like if you ask me that question, I'd say something like Double Nickels. I'd say something like Zen Arcade. I might have said Zen Arcade if you asked me that.
Yeah.
Phrased
But
it
now
that way.
you've got me wondering, like, what would I like if I really think about it? What is my true favorite? I'm trying to find that 100 and 100 to see what was up there.
It's kind of like, what is a record that you feel in your core? Not necessarily like what is a record that you would like armchair expert like decide. And I feel like there are records that are great, that are important, really, really important to me. And Zen Arcade is definitely a record that I feel to my core. But it's also the record that I would be like, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I just
take
found
a puff from a pipe and say, Zen Arcade by Husker Du.
Yeah. I think I just found mine. I looked at that list and I was like, yeah, it's definitely Figureheads on the Forefront of Pop Culture by Blenderhead. That's that one. It's the one I feel in my core that I'm just like, yep, that's my favorite punk record. Like, it jumped out at me as that's my favorite punk record. Wow. And it's very similar stylistically and scene wise. And that's very funny. Wow. We're revealing things. We're learning things about ourselves.
And that's one too. Like, that's one of those records that I'm like, if in the punk canon or my personal punk, like records that shaped me, Figureheads is massive. And I put it in the same category with like the last two Roadside Monument records and Frodus, the last two Frodus records. It's like these bands that were all connected, some of them like in this, like literally in the same scene, and then others that like played with each other, Frodus being the East Coast branch of that little group of bands with 90 Pound Wuss, of the tooth and nail bands that are like actually incredible.
Yeah. There's like four that are just like incredible bands, and you're just like, and nobody knows outside of Frodus is the one who got away, thankfully, by not pigeonholing themselves as a Christian band.
Yeah. Some of the history of Frodus, for those who don't know, they are a DC metro area band. They are a Discord adjacent band, never on Discord. Released stuff through Love It Records, which was kind of one of those Commonwealth, Virginia labels that put out a lot of the bands in that area that would have played with Discord bands or were like chummy with Discord bands or were close. Basically, the bands that were not that Ian didn't like enough to put out their records, or were putting out a record when Discord was like, yeah, our schedule is full. We just can't put anything else out.
Well, isn't there also like the thing with Discord too that they're like, if you could get a label outside of DC to put you out, he wouldn't put you out?
Yeah, there was some of that too, of him being like, I want other people to do what Discord does, so I'm not going to take bands from other labels that are in the area.
Yeah.
I think so much of the Discord ethos is like, there shouldn't be a Discord. There should be a lot of Discords.
Yeah. That, and also Discord is very much like, now especially, it's very much just like a regional label.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know if there's anybody on that label that is from the West Coast, it's only because they were on the East Coast at one point.
Yeah.
And they were a Discord band before,
Yeah. So early on, Frodus really started out heavily inspired by like Revolution Summer and then like early Discord bands. And that was definitely what they were going for. And they kind of found their way onto Solid State, or Tooth and Nail Records, not Solid State, through other bands. And I can never remember exactly who it was. And maybe it was like Roadside Monument. They were probably like close with them because they did do the Roadside Monument split around the time of Conglomerate International, which would have been, so I think Roadside was the connection. It was like, hey, they're gonna go in this like, and that was the thing. There was this almost turning point in Tooth and Nail's history where they were like, we're gonna get away from the Christian rock thing. We're gonna be a serious label for like kind of arty punk bands. I listened to a podcast where Jason Hamaker was talking about it, and I can't remember which podcast it was, but he talked about, is like, they talked him up. It was like, we're gonna do this Roadside Monument, and we've got like these other bands, and like the Solid State is getting into like this heavy stuff, and like some like really good hardcore bands, and then I think he said, and then they like put out our record, and then like the next thing they put out was like a rockabilly record.
Deluxe Tone Rockets?
It might have been Element 101.
Oh yeah.
They did the swing revival thing, right?
Flight 180.
Flight 180, that's the band I was thinking of. Element 101 is someone else.
Well, I wonder if that's listed, because you can look at, they got the catalog numbers, I think, of Tooth and Nail on the Wikipedia, or at least the release order. Because now I'm really curious to know what was the very next record.
I don't think it was the next, but it was very close.
What would that have been? 98?
Yeah. Conglomerate International. The very next thing was Bon Voyage, which was a BEC release, but then there was an Outer Circle record.
Yeah, it takes a minute, because I would say everything after that up until Flight 180 comes out the same year in October. So that probably was the one that did it. Because everybody else, I imagine they would have been fine with, maybe. Though the Dingies were the same day as Bon Voyage, but I mean, they weren't paying it. They were probably on the road, not paying attention to.
He might have been thinking of that Deluxe Tone Rockets record though in '99.
Yeah. Which is like, was jokingly referred to like as the worst record on Tooth and Nail ever. And
it's hilarious because it was released same day as Shorthand Operation by 90 Pound Wuss, one of the best records they ever put out. So I think very quickly within their tenure with Tooth and Nail, they were like really disenchanted with the label and was like, yeah, I don't think this is going to go in the direction that they're like trying to make it go. And it was probably all, who was the A&R guy then?
Well, Billy Powers probably would have been, yeah, Billy was probably the one who's like, hell yeah, I want you on this label. Cause he, Linderhead is very similar and inspired by very similar artists as Frodus. So, and he was always like, what was the joke? He said him and Brandon Ebel used to have this argument all the time where Brandon would say like, we could have had 5 Iron Frenzy. And then like, I think his comeback was like, we could have had Dashboard or somebody like that. It was one of those, like a huge emo band.
Yeah.
Paramore, maybe even.
I mean, it would have been Dashboard most likely just because of Further Seems Forever.
Yeah.
Like they didn't lock down that secure
Yeah.
essential member.
So to get off the To the Know train, we were talking about it. This is considered one of the most influential records of this for post-hardcore. Is it though?
It is and it isn't.
Yeah.
So the thing about Frodus is that nobody liked them in the 90s.
Yeah.
Or even knew who they were. And then for many years, no one knew who they were or cared about them. But for some reason, you will meet like 10 Frodus fans in your life. It's just like, if you know who they are, you then suddenly run into all of these people who are like, this is the most important band in the world to me. Like, I have the logo tattoo or something like that. Like just people that are like, you get into them and then there's this like fetish that you develop for them. You just become so obsessed and you absorb all of this information and you like all of this content that they have. They're very collectory. Maybe it's just a nerd thing. You're a nerd band. I feel like maybe it just appeals to that kind of like nerd mentality of like, I need to know everything that I can know about this band and collect every piece of memorabilia I can find. I definitely have multiple copies of at least a few of their records.
Which means something because you're not a multiple copy guy.
No, I'm not. I'm really not.
I actually have no multiple copies. I don't think I am. I don't have any.
Yeah, I have this record. I have on tape, the original Czech pressing, which I think probably came out in 2001 or 2002.
So I was going to ask about that. So there are 3 different press dates, or not press dates, but release dates on like Discogs. So I was like, when did this actually come out? So there's a cassette version from oh my God, it's a lot of Z's. SZCZESCIARZ Rundfunk Group from 1999. And then 2 vinyl editions on Day After Records, which I think that's the Czech record label. Mm-hmm. And then the CD version comes out on Fueled by Ramen. So my guess is that tape might have just been something that they did, or it's like a bootleg.
Might have been some bootlegs. There was stuff that circulated around the time of the recording and shortly after.
Yeah, it's probably like that a tape was made. It said there were 100 copies of it, though. So maybe they had something that they gave out.
There is a tape from, I want to say it's from Day After. Let me actually pull it out and look at it. No, this is the 1999. That is just the copyright, I think.
Okay.
Because that's when the record was recorded. This tape. So the thing about the tape is there are 100 copies. I have one of them. They were never released officially until shortly before the reissue of the vinyl reissue, because they did the tape through this like Czech label or like someone associated with the Czech label that the Day After pressing of the vinyl. But then they lost them. They were essentially lost forever. And then Love It Records found them. Love It had the box of them, and they were just like going through their storage and were like, what are these Frodus tapes? So then they put them online. So they never really were released until way, way, way later.
That's funny. I didn't realize that tape was never officially released. Yeah. So it also, too, that copies of the record circulated on Napster in the year 2000 as well.
Yeah.
So you could have heard
leaked material.
You could have heard it before 2001 and Fueled by Ramen and got their hands on it. It was supposed to come out on a record label called MIA, who went out of business because they were getting sued for something that happened like 20 years before. So then the guy was just like, I gotta dump anything that's not making me money. So he dumped the label, and so he didn't put it out. Which then they took forever to find a label to put it out because they broke up immediately after recording the record.
So the story goes, after being really disenchanted with their experience with Tooth and Nail Records, they did some touring, and they were on the notorious Refused tour.
Mm-hmm.
They had toured with Refused previously in Europe. They toured like all of Sweden, which no American bands did. They toured a little bit in Europe. They did do a tour in Japan as well around the same time period, but not with Refused. I think that was only with like Atomic Fireball. Maybe some other Japanese bands. I want to say it was just Atomic Fireball on that tour, but they were one of the bands that was on they were really the only other band that was on the Refused tour, the East Coast portion of it. There were probably some bands that I think that played multiple dates of that tour, but they were the only ones that were like, in a van with them. So that's that tour. The story is Refused gets in a car accident and like where they wreck their van or like a fender bender in like Georgia. And that was like the deciding point. They're like, we're fucking done. This sucks. This tour is awful. No one cares about us. We're not making any money. We all hate each other. Now we're in an accident. Let's just play a couple more. Let's try to finish the tour. And then like, I think one of the last ones was like Greensboro, North Carolina. The cops shut it down at like the first song that Refused played. And then I think they were going to play the next one. I don't know. There's a lot of debate about what show was the official last Refused show, but they just broke up very shortly after that and were like, we're going home. We're canceling the rest of our dates. We're not playing. And Frodus was like, we need to keep touring.
Yeah.
We're taking time off. We're spending money on this. Like, we got to tour. Like, so they finished the rest of the East Coast. And then their van broke down, and then they flew to the West Coast and they took 90 Pound Wuss's van because 90 Pound Wuss wasn't touring at the time. They were like, come out here, use our van. We'll lend it to you. And I want to say the 90 Pound Wuss van broke down as well. And that they might have picked up another van. I don't know if that was the tour that like 3 vans died, but they had a succession of vans breaking down for like the last bit of stretch of their touring, and it was miserable. But they did it, and they finished the tour. They did the West Coast portion, and then they came home, and then they wrote this record and recorded it. They started recording it, and they were really burning out. They weren't fighting. I don't think that there was like internal conflict. I've never gotten the impression that there was any significant internal conflict with the band. They might have disagreed on some things. I know the main thing that they maybe had an issue with was Shelby was really frustrated with hardcore and being a hardcore band because he didn't really want to be a hardcore band. He wanted to be an art band, and he hated all of the hardcore politics that they were involved with and getting stuck on like, shows with breakdown bands.
Are there flyers for the Frodus Refused show in Greensboro? Is it on Punks on Paper?
Let's say Darkest Hour. Oh no, October 3rd, 1998.
Is it? There's a North Carolina band on that show too, and I don't remember who it is.
Guilford with Frodus, Cavity, and Catharsis.
That's what it was. Catharsis was the band. That was the tour. Yep, there it is. There's the flyer for it. Punks on Paper has it. Yep, it's the Superman turning into an alien flyer. Cavity is a weird one. But Catharsis were on that show too. That's so fucking crazy. Part of me was like, was it Zagoda? But no, it was Catharsis. I bet Zagoda was there though. It's funny. I think Harrisonburg is considered the actual final last show.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they got to play. Right, that's the story.
Yeah, maybe, and that might be the one that got shut down.
Yeah.
On the last song, but so like technically the last one was Greensboro, but like the last full set was Greensboro, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, this record lands in their career where they're really disenchanted and getting kind of burned out, and no one really cared about Conglomerate International, and it's probably largely because they were on a Christian rock label.
Yeah, it was being sold in Christian bookstores.
They were already weird and not well understood by most audiences. Received well in Europe and Japan.
Received so well that isn't the joke that Refused ripped off Frodus for their sound?
Refused borrowed from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Very liberally.
Extensively.
But it is the most suspicious when they toured with them so much.
Yeah.
And Refused gets the credit for doing a lot of what Frodus also did.
Was already doing before they were doing it.
So they're wanting to push in a different direction, I think. Shelby definitely wants to do more melodic stuff, which shows big time on this record. And Nathan is probably along for that ride. As far as, what he would do after Frodus, he did the Out Circuit, most notably, is very much in line with this record, the more melodic side of it, and like the electronic elements. And Shelby was getting into electronic stuff and doing like some chiptune kind of stuff. And really the only one keeping it hardcore ultimately is Jason.
Yeah. Because he goes and plays in Battery next.
Yeah, he was in Battery and he was in Combat Wounded Veteran.
And he had his joke power violence band, right? Man Cake. There's no recordings, right, of that one? Or no official recordings. He does Regents way later. Yeah, the thing about MIA Records too is that they even said, I read an interview where during the final reissue for the record, they were talking about how, if MIA hadn't have closed and like we'd actually put it out on that label, we might have stayed together because they were going to put some money into us. Like they were going to shoot a video for us. And like, he was like, a lot of the part of the reason why we broke up is we just didn't have that backing support from a label with money, like to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there just already been that support, they may not have broken up. Because I think part of it was, they weren't mad at each other or anything like that. It was like, we can't keep doing this. Like,
yeah,
we got to either make money immediately or call it quits and do something else.
Yeah, it needs to go somewhere. We need to be selling these records to keep doing this. And then on top of that, they also got slammed with a ton of personal and family issues. During the writing and recording of this record. 699 on this record it's the most melodic song on here. There's really no screaming. It's kind of a slower song. It's really somber. It's a beautiful song. And it is the catch-all of all of the personal drama that they were dealing with. Jason Hammaker's fiance passed away from cancer, or was diagnosed. I can't remember. She was diagnosed that month. She did pass away like the next year. Shelby's father had a stroke. Nathan's like long-term, like really serious relationship, girlfriend. They broke up right in the middle of this, like they're writing and recording this record, and they were just like, yeah, let's stop.
Yeah.
Like no one wants to put this record out. They were briefly courted by Sub Pop, supposedly, which, man, can you imagine the alternate timeline where Sub Pop puts this record out in like 99, late 99 or early 2000s, when you have Refused doing The Shape of Punk to Come, and you have At the Drive-In doing Relationship of Command.
Yeah, because those are the three. Those are the three of this era doing this thing that are considered the most influential out of all the bands. And if they had Sub Pop behind this, they probably would have kept on. And because if you really think about it, so yes, this winds up coming out in 2001 on Fueled by Ramen, but it was recorded in 1999 and the tape existed in 1999. So that means it would have come out probably right there at the turn of the new year in 2000. You know who was putting out records in 1999? Nobody. Like, who sounds like this record? The closest you get, Burning Airlines put out their first record. Blindside has A Thought Crushed My Mind, which is just a straight Refused worship record. Mile Marker have a record, who they've always been kind of tied to them. Engine Down, and then like what else? Grade kind of put out that, that record's sort of similar, but not really. Zagoda, like nobody listened to Zagoda. They had anybody else. If you look at like the tagged post-hardcore, everybody else is leaning more emo or screamo, and this would have stood out so much more between. It would have been Refused, this record, and then At the Drive-In, Relationship of Command. Like that would have been the triumvirate of this, because with Sub Pop behind them, they would have had so much more attention than they've ever gotten before, and they would have got that historical being like they're on Sub Pop. That's a historical thing. I don't know what Sub Pop was doing in 2000, but they're still putting out records today that are well regarded. But my guess is because they were like almost done, that's why Sub Pop didn't put it out. They're like, I don't know, you sound like you're on the verge of breaking up.
Let me see. I'm really curious. What would Sub Pop have released
in the year 2000? So I think I've got it.
There's a Murder City Devils record, so that's definitely in the same kind of close.
Mudhoney record.
I think that's probably a reissue.
Close.
They had a Damon and Naomi record.
Yeah.
99 and 2000 they're doing like Damien Dorado records, and
yeah. So 2000 Sub Pop really is not like.
But they would have had the money behind it.
Yeah. Well, then if you look at what Sub Pop does right after that, so what else they got going on? Right after that, they do the Shins.
Yeah.
And
Red
Bright
House
Eyes.
And Bright Eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. So they would have been around that time, so they would have got a little bit more eyeballs on them. I mean, because if you go to 01, you do see some more similar sounding stuff. Like there's more records that are coming out that are in the vein of this one. This one's better than most of them, if not all of them. But then we're also like, this is also like 2 steps away from the Sasscore coming out in like a couple years. Because Sasscore is definitely a inspiration of this type of post-hardcore. Or vice versa. Sasscore takes a lot from this type of post-hardcore. Which they even said in interviews, they were like, I don't know, we wouldn't have really fit in either anyway, because we didn't have the angular hair and we weren't wearing like neon. So we still would have been the weirdos. Shelby
was wearing, like thick horn rim glasses and cowboy shirts.
Yeah.
And they would tell people on tour that they were Weezer. Like they'd just be like eating at a restaurant and they're like, oh yeah. People were like, are you a band? And they're like, yeah, we're Weezer.
Because it had been a while since Weezer had been like really relevant too. So it probably came from like more than anything. They were like, yeah, people would believe that because Weezer had done Pinkerton in the earlier 90s and then nothing. He went to college. So
yeah,
till the Green album in 01.
Yeah. So they broke up in 99. They finished this record. They played like maybe like one last show in late 99, and they just kind of stopped. I don't know that it was like necessarily that they verbalized to each other, we're done, we're breaking up. But they weren't making any plans. It was really obvious that they were done. And then Nathan moved away.
Does he go to Washington?
I'm not totally sure what the timeline of his moving was, but when they put this record out, once they finally had someone interested in actually putting it out and Fueled by Ramen agreed to release it, Nathan sent them a letter. He sent a letter to Shelby saying like, because Shelby and Jason were talking about kind of reuniting and touring to support the record, to push this and like, picking back up where they left off. And Nathan sends them a letter. It's printed on a 7-inch sleeve that came with the reissue, and he basically is just like, I feel like we're done. Like I feel like what we did as a band together, as the three of us, ended, and I think it wouldn't be honest to keep going. I don't know if this is the right move. And the thing is, like, so they've had like 12 bass players or something. There's just been, for most of their history, they really did not have any consistent bass player. And when Nathan joined the band, he's on Conglomerate International and he's on this record. And what he does for this band is so important. He solidifies their sound and then even pushes them into really more adventurous territory on this record. And he is such a driving force for this band, putting out such two monumental records in their discography. So, as far as like essential members go, I think he became one.
It sounds like he became the anchor that they'd always been lacking. Because if you listen to pretty much everything before Conglomerate International, they're very all over the place. And that comes from like budgets and labels and like they're not the sound, but even like from record to record, their sound sounds different.
Yeah.
And it isn't until I think Nathan comes in that it's like, oh, the two records, even though they have 5 full lengths officially, people really only think of the 2, Conglomerate and Weapons. Because yeah, there's F Letter and there's, Fireflies and Molotov Cocktail, but like nobody listens to those.
I mean, I listen to them, but yeah.
You're a super fan. You're a super fan.
But yeah, they're not there, and no one who loves those records or loves Frodus is like, oh, you got to start with F Letter, you got to start with Molotov. No, I'm not going to give you Molotov Cocktail Party. I think it's a really fun record, but I'm not going to give you that to start. I'm going to give you Conglomerate, and then I'm going to say listen to Weapons immediately after. If you really love those 2 records, there's more to explore, but the recording quality is really inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they lack that driving force that really because like F Letter, they're getting there. Jason's got his beat, which is one of my all-time favorite beats. It's the Invisible Timelines beat on Conglomerate International, but it shows up all over their discography, and it's the chaco, go chaco, go chaco, go chaco, chaco, chaco. I'm not aware where did that come from. I've never heard it anywhere else. I don't know what that beat is called. There's a certain placement of his snare that he's doing, and his snare moves around a lot in a lot of his beats, and it's like he's like a hardcore and thrash drummer, like those are his main influences, but there's something else in there that he's just like really finding these subtle little places to like drop a snare hit, or like he'll put the kick right up against a snare hit, and it's like this really like lurching rhythm. And I don't know where you got it from. Maybe it's a Brendan Candy thing. Fugazi's drumming is probably like the closest I can compare to what Jason does in Frodus. But even still, there's that staple chunk sound. It's really, really unique. And Shelby has his very signature guitar playing style too. And he started to really find it on F Letter. But the song structure, I think, ultimately doesn't give it room to breathe, and I really feel like that's what Nathan brought to the band. I think he really gives them a solid foundation.
Well, listening to this record too, like his bass work is kind of the frame for all the songs anyway. Like he's essentially like he's the tracks for the songs. Like he's guiding everything the way it needs to, and this just lets Shelby do whatever he wants on his guitar. And he does a lot of really weird, fun stuff on this record. Like there's some really cool sounds on this album.
Yeah. Jason has this weird syncopated rhythm that is not great for timekeeping. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Nathan is doing double duty of really keeping time and also providing this like harmonic framework for everything, for the song to progress, like for then Shelby to scaffold these like really accented guitar parts and then his vocal melodies on top of. I want to call this record math rock in the way that it's layered and structured. I wouldn't say it's math rock in terms of like time signatures. It's not weird time signatures.
No,
it's weird syncopation, which is really honestly the math rock trick is syncopation.
This isn't like a Juno 44 record, like yeah, it's math rock in the sense that it's not the odd time signatures to me.
But like the record starts with the song Red Bull of Juarez,
mm-hmm.
and Nathan's bass line, that beep, booty, booty, like, oh sorry, that's the I'm scatting the wrong bass line. That's the that's the There Will Be No More Scum, or The Earth Isn't Humming. It's just this grinding deep bass line. There are tons of great bass lines on this record. I feel like every song has a great, unique bass line.
Yeah, like I'm looking at like my notes, and like all my guitar notes are like, listen to that really weird bendy guitar on Out Circuit, the ending. Like, listen to that.
Oh, that I wanted to talk about that. That's the like he does that a couple times on this record. The Earth Isn't Humming ends with it, where he's doing this like full strum, like all strings bending thing with which I think he probably recorded most of this record with a jazz master with a tremolo. That sound more than anything, like has made me want to use tremolo in in my guitar playing. Like there's a lot of technique I learned from Greg Sage, but like the impetus from wanting to hear that sound, it's all Shelby. That surf guitar hardcore sound.
Yeah, and the record kicks off with Red Bull of Juarez. Then it goes into Earth Isn't Humming, which might be the lasting legacy track from this album and from Frodus's career. One, it's probably one of the more melodic songs they ever put out, and it's this kind of this expansive like song that like goes in a lot of different directions, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's longer than a lot of the other songs on the record, right? Like track wise.
It's over 4 minutes. It's almost a 5-minute song.
Yeah.
Out Circuit, the ending is like almost 6. Belgian Congo is a little long too.
Okay, it's probably in the middle as far as length of tracks then. But I don't know, it's so melodic that looking at all these tracks, there are a lot of 4-minute songs on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tracks that are 4 minutes or longer out of 11. And I normally hate songs. Like I normally don't like 4 to 5 minute songs in general, just because I'm like, ugh, can we be done? Because I'm impatient. But I'm not impatient with these songs either. They're not prog, but they have different parts to them. Like every song is just like kind of like a conglomerate of like these different pieces of songs kind of like jammed together with Nathan's kind of like driving, like that's the glue that's holding it all together. So then it's like, yeah, it does feel like I got this guitar idea. All right, well, let me do this line underneath it, and then you can use your guitar idea here, and then Jason can do whatever he wants because he's such a cool drummer. But like The Earth Isn't Humming is, like I said, is the parting song that you're gonna kind of be left with, that you're just like, that's a standout track that could have been a single if they were to do singles for this record. I think it would have been. And then Thrice goes and records it later, kind of giving it a whole new life post Frodus.
Yeah, it's such an interesting song because you have this really standout bass line. You have this like that raked guitar line, that the bling ding, the way he like rakes all of the strings and then hits that note, that sustained note, and then he's doing these like weird arpeggios on like through the whole song, and they're just like broken up and like really like jittery, but they're really melodic too. And then he has this amazing vocal melody, and that was something too, listening to this record, that really stood out to me, is like Shelby's not a great singer. You can definitely hear some wobbles in his voice, and like he doesn't have a lot of like, unless he's screaming, he doesn't have a lot of projection.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got such beautiful melodies.
Mm-hmm.
Like these like drawn out, like elegiac, just like, and I don't even know where they come from. Like they were not a melodic band before this. Like almost not at all. They were almost anti-melodic. They were like very riffy and very screamy. And they were like such a like, the rhythm is the thing that you really memorize about those songs. But and then on this record, it's like all the guitar lines are like these great instrumental melodies, and his voice, he sings these really interesting melodies that are really memorable. And then he has like the big, kind of like the big yelling moments, like on some of these songs too.
The awesome machine, the machines will never die.
Yeah, but they're really fun to sing too. Like I was singing along to these songs and like kind of trying to put a little bit more technique into them, and I'm like, they're like Waylon Jennings melodies. Like you can really get into them and like sing them with like a lot of like energy, and they're really interesting. I don't know. It's weird. You don't expect it from this band and from this record.
Did you notice on the out circuit ending the Jeff Spalding 90-pound wuss guitar effect showing up? It's like on towards the end of the song. It's that weird, what do you call that? What did he do to his guitar to make it sound like that? Whatever pedal that Jeff Spalding used to use frequently on that last 90-pound wuss record. It's that like kind of sound.
It's mostly like a feedback delay time manipulation thing. That you're increasing the feedback and then twisting the time knob.
It has
on
like
the delay pedal.
a
So you get this
whooshing.
you get this like frequency sweep
Yeah.
with like an almost like tremolo, like fast sound.
It's cool because it only appears once on the record. Like it only shows up that one part of that song. Which if they were like, yeah, come to the West Coast and use our van, like so that means that might have been just a hey thanks. Like hey bud, thanks. A reference to your friend, incredibly underrated guitar player too, Jeff Spalding. Fucking genius guitar player that does not get recognized.
There's another little guitar technique that Shelby does, and it's a classic Frodus technique. It goes back pretty far and shows up in quite a few songs, but it shows up on this record in a few places, and it's this. He does these tremolo chords, like he does these really fast full guitar strums that are like black metal guitars almost. Like how fast he's strumming all of the strings, these big fully voiced bar chords, and he does it with this like kind of cleanish distortion tone, and it's like flamenco almost. Like
yeah, I have two different times in my notes. Like there's some kind of like Latin guitar line. Like you hear it in The Earth Isn't Humming, and then I have it again. Where is it in the other notes? Where is it? Maybe I didn't actually write it down. But there's another spot. Maybe it's in June of '99. There's like a jazzy element though in Out Circuit Ending. It could be that song that I'm thinking of that has it. But yeah, there's like a flamenco sound to it.
yeah, like Chirico Summit and Belgian Congo have a lot of like Latin influence in like the rhythm and there's also kind of this spaghetti western sparseness to the guitar playing.
Mm-hmm. Which that I hear in the leads a lot.
Yeah.
Like on the slower songs, because there are a couple of songs on here that are like this is the hard Frodus tracks, like Year of the Hex, which has like some of the harshest vocals from him on here, and like Awesome Machine feels like I could have been on Conglomerate.
And Year of the Hex was actually Nathan doing vocals.
Oh, nice. Oh, okay. That explains why he sounds so different then.
The really, really harsh screaming vocals on this record, and I didn't know this for a really long time. Nathan actually messaged me to tell me that he sang those songs. Because I've written a review of this record when they did the reissue and talked about it before on my blog, and he messaged me. He was like, he was like, first, thanks for writing about this. Like, he's actually messaged me multiple times about that. Like, he messaged me recently, not recently, and a couple of years ago, was like, I was reminded of this. I just wanted to reach out to you again and say thank you. But he like corrected me that first time when I posted. He's like, actually, I did those vocals. I was like, oh, that's why they sound so different.
I guess he has a similar voice to Shelby, but like it's like, whoa, he's like going for it on this one.
Yeah, it's pure acid. It is just the most scorched, harsh sounding scream. Short of like Majority Rule, like or Zayo, like that kind of like throaty, gargly kind of scream. But
which is funny because he doesn't do anything like that on the Out Circuit, does he?
No, I don't. I think he mostly sings on those records.
Yeah, and then there's the second Out Circuit record, right? Because there's an album and an EP, I think, from the Out Circuit. Oh yeah, there's those two albums. There's Burn Your Scripts Boys, but then there's Pierce the Empire with a Sound, and that one is just like shitloads of guest vocals on there.
Yeah.
Which it's not listed on the Discogs. There were like 6 guest vocalists on that record, and all it lists is Nathan Burke, Jared McFarlane, and Tepi Teranishi from Thrice. He mixed that record. I want the actual guest list on that record though. Anyway, I'll be here forever if I'm just trying to find this, but we can keep going. Oh, there we go. Dustin Kintrew of Thrice is on that record. Sean Ingram of Coalesce is on there. Tepi plays guitar. I thought there were more vocalists than that. Maybe it's just the two, but My memory failed me. Going through this record, and then I haven't listened to it in a long time, but compared to Conglomerate International, I do think I like that record a little more because it feels like it has a little bit more of the structure to some of the songs. Like, it's not as, this one is a lot more exploratory and experimental than Conglomerate International. And what I like about Conglomerate, though, is that it is more of a hardcore record. And I think that's why I slightly prefer that one. I feel like you can take songs from that record out of the context of it and they work just fine. But I don't know that you can take the songs off this record out of context for the most part and they work as well.
There's not as many songs on Weapons that could be singles, I think, or comp songs.
Yeah.
Like you could take Red Bull of Juarez out, but it is actually one of the shorter songs.
Mhm.
You could take The Earth Isn't Humming, There Will Be No More Scum. Out Circuit is a little long for that, but I think it does work. And then like the last half of the record, though, it's really only the Awesome Machine. Everything else is not representative of the band. Belgian Congo is almost 6 minutes long and it's instrumental.
There's like 2 instrumental tracks on there.
The
too,
title
right?
track at the end is 3 minutes long and it's instrumental. 699 is like the slow, clean singing song.
It's
Whole
Hush-
Crush
yeah,
Death
Whole
is
Crush Death.
weird.
It's got the electronic drum beat on it.
Yeah, it's like this kind of industrial-ish. And then Year of the Hex is like so harsh and dissonant, and
Yeah.
it doesn't work. It doesn't really sound like them, and the vocals being different is a
It
big
works in
part
the
of it.
context of the record, but it doesn't work. You wouldn't want to take it out and be like, here's a Frodus song for someone. And they'd be like, what? This is Frodus? Like, well, not really. So yeah, everybody kind of goes on and does these different things. Shelby Cinca goes on to form the Cassettes, the Black Sea / Decahedron, Frantic Mantis, Triobolus, the Travelers of Time. He's got his own label, Columbia, is that what it's called? Nathan Burke's got the Out Circuit and Night is Invisible. And then Jason Hammaker, we mentioned his, he's Battery, Combat Wounded Veteran. He plays in Decahedron, Regents. And then he also produced and engineered a record of Armenian chant,
Yeah.
which is very interesting.
So he did this really. Jason did a lot of traveling post Frodus. He initially, it's a really weird story, but he initially was like, someone told him he should go record like some like medieval chant, or like they wanted to do like an ice burn, like this really weird experimental hardcore band, metal, or like metal band, where they like use like these ancient chants. And he ended up like, so he did this, went traveling, and he went to like Syria and like basically did this like really important preservation work.
Yeah.
Almost
yeah, that's what it
entirely by
was.
accident, where he recorded these incredibly old early Christian chants that like that community has been ravaged by, by war, and like these might be the only recordings that exist of that stuff.
Yeah, they're so it's like it's under the name Vrev Yeznig Zikchanian, and it's called 40 Martyrs Armenian Chanting from Aleppo.
Yeah.
And he like engineered it, produced it. It's released as a single-sided album. Yeah, and it's got like all these. It doesn't give the actual performers. All chants recorded on location by Vrev Yeznig Zikchanian on location in 40 Martyrs Church, Aleppo, Syria, 2006 and 2010.
Yeah.
So it's the church is probably one singing, whoever's in that church. Very interesting. Yeah, it definitely has like a preservation feel to it. Like this needs to be documented. And then the band would reunite and release a 7-inch. And how many shows did they play around that 7-inch? Not very many, right?
No, not a lot. They did a couple of U.S. dates. They did a couple of European dates. And yeah, released that 7-inch, which was a great 7-inch. The songs are killer. They've hinted at possibly recording more, but I don't think that has happened or will happen. The next logical step, if you like this record, is to go check out the Decahedron stuff, because it's very much in the same lane. It's a little more focused on like songs than it is like the expansive atmosphere of this record.
Oh, okay. So in 2008, at the Swedish Embassy in Washington, D.C., they did a stage takeover during Division of Laura Lee's set and played one song. And then in 2009, they played Arlington twice. No, yeah, listed twice, but it's the same date. I don't know. Arlington, Austin, to Austin twice. They did South by Southwest. Love it. Showcase. They played with the Young Widows the next night. Then they played in Baltimore, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Orlando, and Gainesville at Common Ground.
Yeah.
And then in Washington, D.C. at the Black Cat. That was the last one in 2009. That you were very tempted to go to.
Should have gone.
Yeah, should have gone.
Should have gone. I went camping with friends, and then we started our band. So the next day. So
by the way, the last show before the breakup was December 1999, Vienna, Virginia, at Jam and Java. Is the Record Convergence closing show with Darkest Hour, Majority Rules, and Danger Eyes, or Angel Eyes, Danger Eyes. I love their connection to the Richmond bands, though. Yeah. Any last thoughts? I kind of covered everything in my notes. Do you have anything?
I guess we didn't touch on the Pandemic album cover, or the whole fact that they just like, not predicted, but like had their finger on the pulse of like late stage capitalism and its effects on the world, and how technology would be an instrumental part of that. Shelby, I know, absolutely wishes he did not predict all of that stuff. But like, as far as like their whole the whole speculative fiction, science fiction, cyberpunky thing, it seems really corny and like nerdy, but it's like it's really accurate. The destructive capability of social media, the internet, and information technology, and the deregulation of banking industries and technology and communications at the same time fucked us.
What is that VHS that they did? It's like them like going around. It was around Conglomerate, right?
Yeah.
And they're just like going around shouting their like Frodusisms that they're anti-corporate Frodus.
Their bullhorn and their secret agent stuff.
But yeah, those masks.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. The photo was from like Japan, right?
They toured Japan during like a big bird flu outbreak.
Yeah. And everybody was wearing masks there because Asian countries have been pretty good about wearing masks for a long time. There is a little bit of a social responsibility to other people in that country. Very strange. Also, deeply conservative country too. So
yeah, I'm not going to sing the praises of
Yeah, it's a very interesting country. Culture is very strange in Japan as far as some things they're progressive on, other things they're very conservative on. And this is totally unrelated to this record, but I want to read as much as I possibly can from like Japanese like progressives and like people doing commentary and like actually referring to like Japanese society as a whole, and like a lot of it's. I know there's like an artist who does like those big inflatables. Like I think it's a woman. I think it's her series where it's like, because in Japan it's always about cuteness, and so she has these gigantic inflatable cute vinyl sculptures, and I want to read like Japanese radical literature just to see what type of stuff they're saying there, because it exists in every country.
Yeah, a lot of it is probably poorly translated.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, because like Americans are really bad about learning Asian languages.
But it's not even just Americans are bad about it. I feel like Western intellectualism, academia does a really bad job of engaging with the East on philosophy and politics.
Yeah. But yeah, tangent there. But classic record, important record that's influence may not be as well known as it is. Excellent record, an all-timer. Guess that means on the next time I do it, it's my turn to pick an all-timer.
Yeah, I just figured not many people are going to pick this. Probably no one's going to pick this.
Yeah. Unless we just find the other 11th diehard Frodus fan.
I know of them. I follow a lot of them.
Yeah. Because I'm not even a diehard Frodus fan. I like Frodus. I meant to ask this. There's this thing between us. We both love a lot of the same bands, but there's also bands that are your bands and bands that are my bands. And Frodus is very much your band. I meant to ask this earlier. Why Frodus?
I don't know. It was just the right time. It was the right moment. Like, I know when it happened, and it was we had heard a song from Conglomerate International on the Tooth and Nail 10th anniversary box set, and I was like, this is kind of weird. I don't know.
That box set is so fucking formative for me. God.
Yeah. But then we were on the Demon Hunter message board, and someone posted this album in the download thread. August Winterman. Still remember his screen name. And I was like, I'll check it out. He says it's really good. Compares it to some stuff I'd be interested in. And listened to it and was like, this is amazing. I love this record. And then went and like looked them up. And we sat there, and I know we sat there and looked at their website like all night. And I was just so drawn into that whole aesthetic that they had, that millennium, like cyberpunk, really cryptic, really anti-capitalist aesthetic. And that they had constructed this whole like kayfabe, like this like world that they lived in as a band. I thought it was so interesting, and I really liked the music. So then like just immediately started downloading like everything.
Yeah.
So I just basically absorbed their entire discography in like a month. It's just been ever since.
Who's one of my bands that's like that you're not like absorbing? Is it Five Iron, I guess?
I've definitely got pretty into Five Iron. They were definitely your band at first.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've had enough time with them that they've become a pretty important band to me. But
yeah, I don't know.
I think I tend to go in much further in other directions than you do.
Yeah. Well, I think that'll do it for us this week. This actually kind of wound up being one of the longer ones, so which makes sense. All-time favorite record for you. Might as well go deep on it, as exhaustive as we can. What if a guest was like, "I want to talk about that record"? Would that be? What records would make it on the list of? I'd do it again.
All right, we can do that one again.
It's a small list. It's a very small list. Because then I would just want to know someone else's. Like,
I would just tell them, can we do Conglomerate? We'll just change the year. Don't tell anybody. And you can pick Conglomerate, and we can talk about that one. Because I could talk about that one kind of song by song. And
yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Please give us feedback on all the social medias or emails and voicemails. And those are all in the show notes. And hope you enjoyed the show. Leave us a review or a rating over on iTunes. I found a hidden review that I'd never seen before from like a couple years ago that for some reason doesn't show up on the iTunes or the Apple Podcast app. But it shows up when you look for it, when you look at like your chartable ranking, like where you are in the rest of the world. And it was a negative comment, but it was just like, why have I never seen this before? I wonder why. It must have been like submitted somewhere else. I don't know, but give us a positive review, and we will see you next week.
This is WJCY TV 46 in Belmont, signing off another broadcast day. Join TV 46 at 6 a.m. for more movies and more entertainment on Charlotte's only independent station.
Good night, good night, good night. It's time to say good night. Good night, good night, good night. What more is there to say but good night?